to judge tonight. And one thing, a couple things I'd like to say. This is probably my seventh or eighth Zoom that I've done, not only for camera club but for church meetings and stuff like that too. And even just Monday night, I just got a new computer, and I loaded Lightroom. I had a difficult time of getting my hard drive for Lightroom to recognize it. So after a day of frustration, I call it my computer geek, and that's Don Trinick. And so Don and I emailed back and forth a couple of times. He said, "I tell you why don't you and I have a Zoom meeting Monday night?" I said, "Sure." And with that Zoom meeting, he was able to fix me in about 30 minutes. And I just spent about many hours trying to fix it. So Zoom is the thing to do now, I guess, during this time. So with that, we'll go ahead and however we start. Now I'm going to assume you can't see my cursor, can you? I'm moving it now.
No.
You would not be. I didn't think so.
No. And John, could you try to speak a little louder? And every time you move away from your computer screen, your sound fades a little bit.
Okay. No. Is that okay?
That's better, yeah. And maybe you could turn your screen so that we can see more than your glasses and your forehead.
Okay.
Oh, that's perfect. Perfect. Better? Thank you.
Okay.
Jill, you ready to go?
We'll start with the assignment category then. And we'll be the sevens. Oh, fives. There we go. Sorry, Terry. I forgot to take those out. Our first image is Alia Macro.
So just before I get started, do you want me to say next when we move on?
Yeah, when you're finished commenting, you could say next.
Okay, all right. I actually like this image quite a bit. I thought the photographer did really a nice job. The focus of this is really very nice into the center. I actually like the aperture that they did choose. The outside of the flower is actually soft, and I do like that. I like the background, but I actually felt that it was just really too tight in the frame. I think the photographer needed just to have a little bit more room into the frame. So back it up just a little bit. If you wanted to get in really tighter, then you could easily gotten in tighter and almost the entire flower to be in your image onto it. Next.
Blue Hands.
Really nice, but I like what the photographer was doing right here. A very shallow depth of field, you know, and I can see where he or she focused really almost right by where those hands joined, probably just a little bit to our side of it. But I'm dying to see this in a normal, like reading the clock position. So I'm just dying to see that. I didn't like the angle, the side angle that we did do on it. I do like their choice, the choice of aperture. They did really precise focus right on where they did focus onto it. Also, I think what you see with the glass on the watch itself, I don't know if that's some straight light that's coming in, but it's got that foggy look to it. And it's not just because it's out of focus. It has some type of a fog built in there, probably from the light coming through. Next. Very nice. I believe this is a great spangled fritillary. You can kind of tell by the orange there onto the wings. I like that the plant that it is on. The background really kind of makes the butterfly really do stand out. I think they probably needed just a little bit more contrast or some more color, and I think you could have done that very easily onto it. The butterfly itself is sharp. I can see the eye is very nicely sharp, and that's really what has to be sharp. The top of the wings that are being soft, that does not bother me at all. What has to be sharp is sharp onto it. Next. I love the colors of this. I like the you know, the reds and the orange and then the green onto it. And I actually do like the background on it. It's not black. I can see something back there onto it. But what did bother me is the stem. The stem itself is out of focus. And I think you focused right on the center. I believe this is a pear, but you photograph right onto the bottom of the red there, which is good. But I think maybe even stopping down, maybe another 2/3 of a stop, I think you would have gotten that stem sharp. I think the stem had to be sharp onto it. Next.
Feather layers.
Yeah, this I love the patterns on this, on these feathers onto it. I like the detail. I like the texture onto it. But I was bothered by it a little bit. I couldn't really tell if that's noise that I'm seeing in there, or you know, it didn't have that smoothness to it that I really expect to see on some feathers onto it. But I like what the photographer did. They got in really nice and tight onto this, and to see some real nice detail on it. Next.
Or
Really a good macro image. The photographer focused right into the center of the flower itself. I like the raindrops that you do see onto it, or the dewdrops, I guess I should say, onto it. And I think you did really a good job of selecting the aperture, but at the same time, I think the flower itself is competing with the background onto it. And you did a good job with that. But you also had on the lower right and then on the lower left, you have those probably the brightness of those stems right there. Then also the very top there, you have some brightness in that. And I think if you look through the viewfinder, you probably would have seen that. I think you could have probably very easily, possibly have moved those out of the way. Next. Again, got some really nice raindrops. You got some really nice dewdrops onto it. The way this is presented, I kind of like the angle of that, and I think what you're trying to show. But for a picture for competition, what I really see on that, the camera should have been facing more towards it, into the center of the flower, and then I think what you would have, instead of having that huge out of focus to your left that you're looking at, you would kind of had that more even. You could have had the center very sharp, and then the softness begin to come from the center to the outside onto it. So I think your composition could have been improved by getting more in center. Really a cute image. I really like this a lot. The little gray tree frog. I mean, he really is really nice and sharp, and I like the contrast I have of the green frog also onto the yellow a little bit. Probably the biggest problem I have with this particular image was that you really had the frog dead center, and I think if you would have maybe changed your angle and even have the frog up just a little bit higher in the direction that he's looking. So if the frog would have been up maybe in the upper right, just a little bit, I'd want to still see all of the stamens. And you could even possibly have gotten just a little bit closer. But the background itself is really nice. The background does not interfere at all with this onto it. But I think you could have improved the composition. Next. You know, I studied this one really a lot, and I think there's really a lot of stuff here to look at. And you know, I probably shouldn't really even say this, but you know, I had a percentage I was kind of going by. So you know, this one was in an A. I actually kind of dropped it down a little bit onto it. I think the photographer had for me, he had a good eye to see this. This is something that I and probably many people would have probably just kind of walked by onto it. But at the same time, it's a tough image to put in for competition, I think. I like it, but to compete against some of the other stuff it's really a hard one to make it move up a bracket or two. I don't know if there's anything I could say to improve on this. I think you did really, really well with what you had for a subject. If I did anything, it probably would be to maybe crop a little bit on that lower left and where you have that, I don't know, that white stick or something hanging down there. I think that'd be a big improvement. Next.
Gray tree frog.
Yeah, these guys. Once you know how to find these little guys, these great tree frogs. I mean, I find a dozen of them every year, just in one little park that I go to frequently, and they just kind of sit there like that. And many times they blend right into their surroundings onto it. You did a real nice job here. The frog itself is really focused really well, and so your pinpoint focus was right on. And for what you had for the day, I don't think there's maybe any improvement you could have done. If possibly, could you have zoomed in just a little bit tighter on here? But what you had working against you was a bright sunny day. And then you have all the highlights in there, a huge amount of autofocus on the left. And I think that is really distracting to the image. So, you know, if you had the range with your zoom or whatever you used on this, you could have went in just a little bit tighter. But I think the day was not working for you being a bright sunny day. It's a picture I would still take, but it's just that it makes it difficult to put it into a competition. Next.
Hibiscus mac.
Really, this is very nice. The stamens on this are really nice and sharp, and you know you got the actual flower itself. What has to be sharp is good. As you look towards you, that part is nice and sharp, and then you got the little bit of fall off of the out of focus on the back side, and that's good. But if you look at it really close, you got a lot of the frame in the back. Uh, it it's it it's distracting, but not overly distracting. I think what you could have done would have been have cropped just a little bit to pull in the upper right in a little bit, pull in the upper left a little bit. You would cut out some of that darker area, and then you're going to totally concentrate on what you're trying to show us with the stamen, and then this beautiful little pink flower onto it. So that's the only thing I could recommend down would be to crop that one just a hair.
Blue feathers. Oh, were you done? Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Really like, you know, the peacock feather onto the lower left, really nice and sharp. The aperture was probably maybe close to wide open, somewhere into that area onto it. But the real distraction, and I don't know if this is part of your story. I'm not really sure, but very, very distracting, and you know, it almost looks like an egg. By that I mean spawn egg or something. But on the upper right-hand side, that is competing a lot with what you're trying to show us on that lower left with that really beautiful blue green. And your eye goes to that a lot. Now, that could have been part of your story by, you know, the loose feathers. I'm not really sure what that is. So, but I do find it distracting. Next.
Red.
One nice thing about judging various camera clubs that do more than nature, like my nature club does, is I see a lot of images that I think are just really unique. And it's just stuff that I personally would probably never ever think of doing. And this would be one of those, taking some thread and then just kind of running it through a needle. Very precise focus on the thread as it's going right through the eye of the needle. I mean, that part is really sharp. And then you get the fall off of the out of focus, going down and then going across to the thread, which I think is what you really wanted to do. And due to the fact that the needle is on the same plane, what you got is you got the entire needle really sharp. So I think that everything you did here was absolutely perfect. And I think that the background's absolutely perfect. And so you say, well, wait a minute, why did it only get a 7? Well, probably because of the competition. There were just some other images I thought were just stronger. But I really like what you did here. I like the thought process and the eye that you had to do something like this. Next.
Old can opener.
Really, again, one of those kind of same comments I had before is something I would never really kind of think of doing. And all of us old fogies know exactly how this can opener works. There may be some of you out there that may not, but I can see the old crank back there, and you're trying to turn that and to open a can. So real unique vision onto it, and I like the sharpness that you have on the cutting edge, and on the ratchets that would actually take the cutting edge right around the can on it. So I do like this. I love the background. Depth of field is absolutely perfect. You're making me see what you want me to see, and I think that is really good. Again, just I think the subject matter was just really tough for the competition. So very nicely done. Next. I looked at this for a long time, and one, just by the title, I was trying to kind of figure out what it was, and I really don't know right now exactly what it is, but I do like it. I liked a lot of what you chose here is for your where you depth of field, and those the orange things sticking up are really sharp. I call them the eyes down there are really sharp into the center. Then it kind of fades off as you go to the left. And I think what you've done to me, you've got probably a little bit too much on the left that's out of focus. I think you could have easily brought that left side in to probably, well, as I look at this, say maybe an inch or so. I think that would have helped. And could you've also positioned your camera to get rid of that upper right where you have that the green area into there? I think that also interferes. So possibly getting a little bit closer, I think you could have got what you really were striving for onto it. Next.
Frog.
Yeah, a bunch of you must have went out after some of these little green tree frogs on it. But this one here is very nicely done. I love the framing of it. I love the out of focus of the grasses, and that the frog itself is really nice and sharp. And I like the out of focus behind the frog, and then the sharpness that you have with the frog in coming down onto it. Again, I don't think there was really a whole lot here I could tell you to do to actually improve that. Possibly, I think you could put just a little bit more punch into the image. You could try a contrast slider or even a green slider, just a little bit, and I think that will give the actual frog just a little bit more punch to it.
Chick.
You got some really good sharpness onto the blossom itself. The stem is really sharp. I like the stem as it comes out a little bit. But I think what I probably would recommend, the background I kind of like. The background is out of focus. It's not really interfering with mine because I kind of know where these plants do grow. And but I would get this plant off center, and I would have probably brought my camera down a little bit. So if you picture the flower, maybe those top leaves, petals, I mean, being maybe, let's say just say 1.5 inches from the top. And then you get more of the stem, you then get more of the flow of the flower as it's kind of reaching up there to the top. You want room at the top, so that's why I'd be down maybe 1.5 inches from the top. And instead of being dead center the way it is.
On scores of 8 and above, read the maker's name before John gives his critique. This one is Birth of a Seed, Pat Chaconis.
This is just great. I really do like this. I like the seed, and I'm just going to take a guess. It might be a milkweed seed. I'm not sure, but I think that might be what it is. And I actually like what the photographer did here. You got the seed there, and if you notice, the seed or where the seed joins, it's not really centered. It's a little bit to the left, which is where it should be. And then you got the feathering effect of everything else coming out. And even when you look in the upper right there, you still see some detail of, we'll say, the feathering that you have onto it. So really nicely handled, really nicely composed, and the exposure of this is just dead on. So very nice.
Hummingbird Moth by Marianne Jarrett.
Yeah, beautiful clear-wing hummingbird moth on common milkweed. You can see the proboscis, what we call the tongue. That's what everybody knows it as, getting the nectar. The moth is just really nice and sharp. The tongue is sharp. The antennas are really nice and sharp. You got some really nice background onto it. And I think it probably needs maybe just a little bit more punch to it. Composition wise or exposure wise, there's really nothing I can say about that. But now whether you take your contrast slider or some of your tonal sliders, I actually think you can put just a little bit more punch into the image itself, but very nicely handled. And I photograph these guys a lot. In fact, after I see whose name is on this one, I think I even know where she maybe took that picture. So very nicely done.
Dewdrop Succulent by Steve.
Really nice. Now, you've heard me talk a little bit about why you got the subject centered. And, there are times that it has to be that way. And this is a time. I really like what the photographer did here, the center of, I don't know, I'm going to call this plant. I'm not sure what it is, but it's dead center. But what makes it work is how the center extends evenly on all 4 of those corners. And to me, it's like shooting really a nice spider web. And I shoot a lot of spider webs. And to me, I've tried all sorts of composition, but a spider web has to be centered. The center of the spider web, then it goes out. And that's what this is. So this is the case, all those things we call rules, I call them guidelines. And, and he or she broke it, and rightfully so. I don't think this composition would have worked in any other way besides being centered. Very nicely done.
Hourglass Tree Frog by Melissa Anderson.
Yeah, really nice. And again, notice where the frog is positioned. The frog is positioned on the top side, and notice that, the frog is kind of looking to our left, and the frog has some room to look into. And then this beautiful flower, this beautiful plant. And then you got this great background onto it. So, I mean, just really nicely handled and very well exposed. And the composition is just really spot on.
Carner Blue Butterfly by Marianne Jerks.
Yeah, I love these butterflies. They're kind of, I think they're either listed rare or species of concern here in Minnesota. and I photograph them every summer. However, I go to Wisconsin and Cricks, Meadows, and Fish Lake area, and they have two life cycles, and so you can go there in June or go there in July, and they're just a beautiful butterfly. Now, what's unique about the butterfly that you can't really tell by this image that's really nicely done is they're really about the size of a dime with the wings folded up like this. So they're a very, very small butterfly. So this really is a really nice, true macro image. And you know, it's hard to tell, but it looks like the butterfly is in flight because I don't see the feet on anything. It may not be, but it's just really well handled on this butterfly milkweed onto it. Really a great background, and the butterfly is really just really nice and sharp. Again, it's one of the things I think, you know, if this is probably is already cropped, I can kind of tell that by a square frame. And I would probably maybe recrop it a little bit, and I would try to move that butterfly maybe a little bit to the, you know, to your left. Again, I don't know what you have over there on the right, but I would try to probably get it a little bit off center. Next.
Simpson wanted an Old Glory tattoo like this picture. Mick Richards.
Yeah, this is really cool. I actually teach how to do this when I teach my macro class, and I use other things, but when I saw this, I said, "Hey, cool! I got to do this with my flag, with my little flags onto it." So I think it's really how appropriate it is for this time of the year that we're having with our all the COVID and election years and all that. So just really nicely done. I love the drops, the water droplets onto it, and you know there's really not much I can probably say. And all those little water drops are really uh, positioned properly. They totally fill the frame. You know, if I had to make one recommendation, would probably be that really bright spot in the upper right. I think you could just crop that half an inch, and you would remove that. And the other one that are more in the center, that they don't bother me. The one in the upper right, your eyes will always go to that. So, but very nicely handled.
By Jay Springett.
Yeah, really. The photographer had to get really pretty close to get a really a nice big frame like this. Really good exposure onto the butterfly. I can really see, you know, both antennas. I can see the proboscis, and really nice detail in the wings. And the butterfly milkweed is there, really a nice background onto it. So just very nicely handled. Next.
Water lily.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. What I've kind of said. There's times that you break all these guidelines, et cetera, and the photographer did this one too. You know, it's not really completely in center, but it's very close to being centered. But I think the exposure and the aperture selection, with you know going all the way down and coming up and then going to the outside, was really spot on. There's nothing on the outside that is distracting. Your eyes are just glued in to the center of this flower, this water lily. It's just glued right into the center. So very nicely done.
Pennant by Don Speck.
Yeah, I saw this, and I shoot a lot of insects and a lot of dragonflies, and they really are very difficult to do. And when I looked at this, just the detail that's into the wings and the detail that's into the thorax and the head of the butterfly, or excuse me, of the dragonfly, then this great background. So then, you know, the technical side of me begins to take hold, and say, how the crap did he do that? Because it's really hard to get all those wingtips sharp. And especially when you're facing these forward wings. Now, the front part of the wings are just a hair soft, but going really just a little bit past those wings all the way through the other wings are really nice and sharp. So just really very nicely handled. The first thing that I said, well, did he do a focus stack? And I said, well, no, it doesn't look like he's dew covered or anything, so it's probably not cold. But I'm going to assume must have shot like F-32 or something. But just really a beautiful dragonfly. Pretty common dragonfly in Minnesota. So, but they're very colorful to photograph. Nicely done.
Under Flower by Melissa Anderson.
Yeah, this particular one, the last two frogs that we saw. Now, this is not a great tree frog. This looks to be more a tropical type of a frog. But one thing you want to always kind of look at is the character. I mean, this frog has character, and you see the feet wrapped around, and you see the underside of the flowers, and it's just so nicely handled. And of course, those big bulging eyes onto it. Then the great background. Absolutely nothing I could say to improve on this, onto it. Really well done. Next.
Now for the creative category, with the sevens.
Now, I got to say a couple things on creative. Is I feel very comfortable judging anything. I don't care if it's nature. I don't care if it's people. I don't care if it's landscapes or cityscapes. Doesn't make any difference. Photography is photography. But when it comes to the creative or the digital art, as some of them will call it also, I really don't do that. So a lot of times I don't know how it's done. So a lot of my judging is not so much on the technique as it is on everything else that photography has to, the composition, all that type of stuff onto it. So on this one here, I really liked what they did. A couple of things. One is I really want to see that back leg. Uh, I just want to see that. The one paw there is lifted, so I know that it's moving, and I don't like that leg missing. And then the other part is it's really too close to the bottom. And I think you need it. And I don't know if you got any room to crop, or if you've cropped it, you need to give some room there. But outside of that, it has to have maybe even just a quarter of an inch on that bottom side would help this tremendously. And I also think that how you got the bear facing, you got a lot of room as it's walking to our left. You probably may not need quite that much onto it. So I think the composition wise, and I think that the technical side is I really do want to see that back leg, and I want to see more room on the bottom. Next.
Ghost Dancer.
Yeah, this actually is really neat. And had I not read the title, I'm not sure if I would have seen that ghost. But once I read the title, I said, yeah, there is a ghost in there. So I really like the uniqueness of that. I like the uniqueness of the title itself. And of course, the ghost part, I don't mind the blacks too much on the right, but I actually think you could bring that out a little bit with your shadow tool. Not a lot, because I think being a ghost, you want it to be dark, but I think you could use your shadow tool. And I think you could bring some of that out just a little bit. And I think you'd have a much more powerful image. Next.
Water Lily.
Yeah, really, the photographer really handled the black and white on this very nicely. In this case, I do like that black background because the white and the black has a nice contrast. And I think the photographer did a really nice job of handling the black and white and handling the exposure onto the white on it. And I like the bottom flowers that are just a little bit say, kind of grayed out or a little bit darker than they are in the top flowers onto it. And again, it's not quite centered, and I think the composition of this is really perfect. And again, probably the biggest downfall was the competition. I just was not able to move this up, but I really don't have any advice to improve on this one.
Okay, for the eight, start with Deb's Car by Mike Waterman.
You know, I think when you look at an image, and then you look at it, then you come back and you look at it, and you come back and you look at it. Just when you just find it interesting, is the photographer really met a goal there of putting a lot of interest into a image, and so I really like the car there, all the detail of the car, the reflections coming off the car. And I like the fact that the windows that you have of the house, you really can see right inside the windows. And so I think everything on this was so nicely handled. Really filled the frame really nice. Very good. Nicely done.
Okay. Desert Critters by Melissa Anderson.
Yeah, this is just cool. I mean, it's just really cool. I'm not sure how she did that. And what's really interesting is I caught the mountain lion right away. And of course, the material and stuff are right around the lion. I like the night behind there. I never caught the little bunny rabbit until I couldn't figure out, well, what's that lion looking at? Oh, he's looking at that rabbit. So, I mean, that's really kind of neat when you have a picture that really makes you look at it and makes you I'm not sure I would have seen that rabbit had I not figured out what that cat was looking at. So the photographer really created a nice image onto it. So very, very nicely done. Now you probably could have cropped a little bit, you know, that lower right, maybe coming in a little bit, maybe a little bit on that lower left. Not a whole lot, because I still like the framing you have of the mountain lion. I love that framing, but I think you could have cropped just a little bit and get just a little bit tighter there. Next.
By Ricky Van Dyke.
Yeah, really, how appropriate for this time that we're in right now. And so that, of course, was maybe a little bit of a bonus for the scoring onto it. Again, like I say, I don't do this kind of work, and I'm not sure the difficulty, the technique behind this, how much it takes to do something like this. But I think the photographer did really good. The mask is great, and you know the hairstyle of the I'm going to assume maybe a nurse or a doctor, something like that. And you know the hair itself looked like it's all sweaty from working or whatever the case is. But what really caught me on this image was the eyes. The eyes just looked like a very, very tired nurse. I mean, that was my impression just by looking at this. And I think when a photographer does that, you got me. I mean, when you put in a story like this, I mean, you got me. You just so nicely done. So kudos to the photographer for doing this. Next.
All right, the nines. Prairie Blue-Eyed Grass by John Speck.
Yeah, really. I love blue-eyed grass, by the way, the little prairie flower. But just so nicely done. I've played around a little bit with some of the digital painting, and I wouldn't even have anything that even match up to this. So just how this was done, really a beautiful background, and the composition of the flowers and the stem, and then the one bud that's kind of, you know, curling around that stem right there. So just really very well done. Again, I have no improvements to do on this. It was just beautifully done.
Okay. Resist Cold takes the 10.
Yeah, very cool. again, again, how appropriate for the time. But again, I think, the lady inside the jar, I think many of us feel that way, that we're in a jar. And so they really did a great job of conveying that message. And again, the sadness, the look, you can't see her eyes too much, but you can tell that she's sad, depressed. She has that emotional impact to the image itself. And if I had to say anything, I probably would have wanted maybe just a hair more room in the bottom. But I mean, just the story, the impact, that the emotional impact this has, was just carried it over.
Okay, how about if we take about a 30-minute or a 30-second break so we can stretch a little bit and maybe run and get another cup of coffee or whatever. Okay?
Indeed.
Sounds good.
Is that okay?
Yeah, you're fine. You seem a little delayed, but
And my
you're doing
blue
well.
thing doesn't light up until I'm done talking. Then it lights up. So I'm a little.
Well, you're doing okay. We're about halfway through as far
Okay.
as the number of images we have to show. Okay, are we ready to start?
I'm ready.
We'll start the nature category with sevens. And our first one will be Angry Robin.
Really, very nice. The photographer really focused on the eye, which is absolutely a necessity that you would do on this particular image. And probably shooting this close to being wide open, because almost everything just even shortly beyond that eye is really soft. So by that kind of really narrows what you're actually going to really see onto it. I like how you position the robin. I see the nest onto it, but I think you needed to shoot at a little bit more depth of field. And again, I'm just going to guess you shot this close to being wide open. So even stopping down to maybe F11, maybe F8, I think that would give you more, the entire head being sharp, the beak being sharp, and you would have picked up just a little bit beyond that head. And I think that would then be your image, because you do have so much of this that's out of focus, and so what happens? It becomes distracting to what you're trying to show us on that eye. I like how you composed it. I like that you're really focused on the eye for a picture like this for animal. You really have to do that. But I think the biggest thing is you needed to stop down just a little bit more to get more. Yeah, I want that whole head sharp. I want that beak sharp. The beak is really important. So going to, I think, probably an F11 would probably have gotten that for you. And I do think that the robin on the nest, the robin knows you're there. I think the robin would have let you have done that to switch your aperture a little bit. Next.
Oh, I love you, Mom.
Yeah, I love the title on this. You got mom there, and then you got the loon juvenile. Is really not a chick anymore. It's gotten to be the juvenile stage, and probably getting to the point where mom and dad are both going to be leaving the little guy alone. onto it. I like the open beak. I like the eye of the loon. The eye of the loon has that sleepy look. So that's important because that kind of tells me it's ignoring the photographer. It doesn't care that the photographer is there. So I think that is really an interesting part about that story is it's totally at ease with the photographer being there. And I can see the eye of the loon onto it. Probably the biggest thing is you had a high contrast day, really a bright sunny day, and that is just itself a little bit distracting. And I'm not sure if there's anything you could have done different on this for the time of the day that you're there. And you caught really a great nature story.
Bighorn U.
I like the vertical on this. I don't know what's on the right or left, but I do like the vertical, and you did the vertical properly. I can see the front legs, and you know you got the head of the U that's in a perfect position. So the composition for vertical is spot on. The difficulty that you had was the time of the day that you were there. I think for the time of the day you hit the exposure dead on, but also what that does, you know, the light is kind of flat and a little bit more contrasty. Obviously, that U is not going to wait till tomorrow morning in that same pose, but it's just that the light is really kind of harsh onto it. Next.
Beauty.
Yeah, I love the black swallowtails, and you can see beautiful swallowtail onto the plant itself. And again, you did everything perfectly as it relates to the insect itself, the butterfly, and then on the flower that it is on. There's nothing I could tell you to do any better with that. You were fighting against that plant on that left-hand side going up. And again, that is kind of bright and that's kind of distracting. Also, you have the plant coming on behind the butterfly, the kind of the gold color there. That also is distracting. Again, I understand there's nothing you could have done with that because a butterfly is flying, they're nectaring, they don't stay there very long. But just sometimes that's the way it is. I would take this picture too, but then you would have those competing devices that makes it difficult to put in for competition. Next. Really a great story. Little green worm of some type that the chickadee has gotten onto it, and you got a nice highlight in the eye, and you know the composition is pretty good. I think you probably could have cropped a little bit in the upper right down to the lower left on it. But again, the problem you have is the light. You got so much bright light there, and you got all those bright area spots onto it. And you know, sometimes these birds and you know animals in general, insects, a lot of times they just don't position themselves in a competition photogenic location. And there's not a thing you can do with that. I still take the pictures and you should still take the pictures, but then I think you got to look at it. You say, you know, oh man, I got so much bright area here. I got a lot of stuff in the background that's very distracting. You know, should I put this into my salon for my camera club? And in this case, it'd be a tough one because of what you have there. But again, it's a picture you have to take, and it's a picture that I have to take. But then I have to make a decision: should I enter this into a salon or a camera club competition? It's a good picture, but for a competition, it makes it tough with the contrast and the busy background that you have. Next.
Fairy Stream.
I actually looked at this quite a bit, and it was just something I just had a hard time with it. You know, when it comes to shooting waterfalls, etc., you know, I think you have a couple of choices. One is really a slow shutter speed for what I call the milky smooth, or maybe a little faster shutter speed to actually watch the drops of the waterfall as they bounce off the rocks, etc. And then this one is kind of in between that, and I think that's always kind of a hard one to do. But I guess what really bothered me was the texture on especially these foregone rocks. I'm looking, are they out of focus, or is there something else going on here? I'm not really sure what it is. Uh, but I think you should have positioned the waterfall differently. Again, you got that waterfall dead center. I look at this, and you got to look, say, well, on the right or the left, did I need all of that? I looked at this. I said, this should have been a vertical. Uh, Again, you see the stick on the right. Now, I would have removed that. Now, again, I'm assuming that it was just driftwood that is very easy to remove, and then those sticks on to the left. I would have removed those also. Now, when I say that, I guarantee I have my knee-high boots on. I mean, I'm around water; they're just always on me. So those are some of the things I would have done. But I think I would have given this a vertical, more so than a horizontal. Next.
Airy sunset.
Yeah, very nice. I think you did really a good job of minimizing the black. Like when it comes to nature image, I'm really not one you want to judge for black. I always say minimize the black. It has no interest. You did really a nice job of that. And so a sunrise or a sunset, I'm not really sure. I like the stray of the light that's coming up to lighting up those clouds onto it. So everything you did, the composition was perfect, and what you did with those clouds is really nice onto it. Again, it's just one of those images that's hard to move into a higher category. And I'm not sure if I could say anything you could have done to have improved this onto it. I think you composed it very nice. Next. A very nice light onto this, and I like the green that you have right there, and I really like the way you compose this, because your eye is going to take me to the left, and it's going to take me through that into that valley, and I like the fact that you're showing me the texture of we'll say the rocks that you have on the left side. But the biggest problem I had is where you're taking me is into a black hole, and I don't know if I like that. I would really try to move my shadow slider, and I would even, try to use my paintbrush, because I see stuff there. I think you can bring some of that out. Not a lot, but I think you bring it out just enough for my eye to go somewhere other than the black. Next. Yeah, very nice hummingbird. Really nice highlight in the eye, and you can see the red on the throat. Uh, Obviously, the photographer had a really high shutter speed to really stop that wing. I do like the background onto it. The background does look like it has a little bit of noise in there onto it, so probably shooting at a higher ISO. I think you could probably remove some of that noise onto it. This looks like some type of bergamot or bee balm, a domestic type onto it, not wild necessarily. But also what I find is the flower, the bee balm, or the red flower down below there. I actually found that kind of distracting. It would have been nice if those could have been eliminated or higher. And I'm not sure if you could have, but your exposure on the hummingbird to stop the wings was nicely done.
One.
Yeah, really good exposure onto that white breast. They're very difficult to do in loons. When they do this, they expose that entire white breast. I can see detail on most of it, just a little bit hot on the very top there, but it still is pretty nice done. And again, I got the eye there. I can see the eye, and on that, and you got the wing there. Now, I'm going to assume that you are probably on a high speed shooting. I would assume that. So you're shooting that, 6, 8, 10 frames per second. And hopefully you are, in a way. And then when you do that, then you get those wings in many, many positions. And you get them like all the way up and all the way down, etc. Uh, and I would have preferred one of those positions more than anything else. is a different position where the wing is all the way up to see the underside, or even when they really get up high and then the wings are all the way down. But it also could be this happened and this is the only image that you got. And all I can say with that is you really did a good job of getting that part of it. Next.
All right, start the eights with A Flying Jewel by Betty.
Yeah, real nice. And I mean, just look at that highlight in the eye, and you can see the detail of the hummingbird going down to the neck to the feathers. A relatively fast, well, probably not relative, a high shutter speed to really stop those wings onto it. And then on the flowers there, over there onto the right-hand side, I probably do wish that the hummingbird and the flowers are just a little bit more to the left onto it. And what it's done is kind of weighed the image to the right. And I really don't need all of that bare green area onto the right. You could crop it, but I'm not sure if that would score-wise would improve the image. I think it had to be a camera movement to really make this higher, but great capture onto this hummingbird. Yeah, I love the position of the camera, very low. So, you know, I always like to teach, you know, camera lens to the eye, you know, on that same plane, and that's really what this is. So I'm not sure if the photographer is actually in the water like I would be, or if he's laying on a pontoon. I don't really know, but I really love that angle that you chose. And, you know, a beautiful hen merganser, a good highlight in the eye with a beautiful background. And the light that you had on this was really nicely done. So very nicely handled.
Bring it.
Yeah, a great storytelling of this redneck grebe onto it, bringing some of the foliage, well, you know, the wider plants over to the nest onto it, and positioned perfectly with a good highlight into the eye, and then bringing the plants, really nice detail. And the water itself is so nicely done, really filling the frame onto it. If anything, you could have given just a hair more room on the back side, but not much. So very nicely done. Yeah, I like this one a lot. And you know, I like the mating ritual that's going on here. And again, both of these grebes are really hair sharp. But I think the photographer really, you know, those things happen relatively quickly, but you really need more room in that bottom. And again, I'm going to guess that the photographer didn't crop it. And if they did, I would put some of that back. Even though you might have some of the grasses there, I think you still need some room onto the bottom. And I would guarantee if I'd had room at the bottom, this would have been at least a 1 point higher score. Just really nice done. You know, it's kind of a behavior you don't see often, and when you do see it, it's usually a little further away. And so for the photographer to get this close to it was just really nicely done. Yeah, I like this. You know, we see a lot of hummingbirds. You know, because of the where we live, and so, but it's not often I see them perched like this. I mean, I see them perched, but it's not not often I see that display of the tail feathers. And I'm not sure what behavior that is. If it's a you know, a stress behavior or some other thing, mating behavior. I'm not really sure. I liked it quite a bit, but the biggest problem with it is it looks like it has quite a bit of noise in it. And I do think that noise can be removed onto it. I think that would help. At the same time, I'd even try to give it just a little bit of contrast onto it, but beautiful background to go with it. Next.
Stilt by Mary Ann Jerks.
Yeah, just really, really nice handle. You know, these are hard birds to shoot because of the contrast of the bird itself, from the blacks to the white. But again, I can see the detail of the blacks. I can see some detail in the white, and I can see the reflections. And of course, a little bit of the story adding to it is the water drip coming off of the bill. And to me, that adds tremendous amount of interest with it. The other thing that I did look at is I'm not sure, but it looks like it could be given just a hair clockwise rotation. It looks like there's a little bit of slant of the water going towards the left onto it. But really good exposure onto the bird, good movement of the bird, and a good storytelling image onto it.
Green-winged teal at golden hour by Mary Ann Jerks.
Yeah, this is a beautiful beautiful bird. I love the birds. I got some pictures of them, but boy, nothing close to what this one has. And you know, it's not just a bird on the water like we have a tendency to get of. It's a beautiful detail of the bird, beautiful detail onto the feathers, and but the bird is preening, the bird is doing something, and that always adds interest to your story. And then you got the beautiful texture as the bird is moving, the beautiful texture of all of that coming from the bird going to the outside. And then you got that really golden light of the water itself. So really very nicely captured. Cropped absolutely perfectly. Now, a lot of people might say, you know, I want to see more reflection of the bird. Well, I really don't care about that because it's not a mirrored reflection. A lot of times a mirrored reflection, you may want to see the whole reflection, but in this case, I don't. The story is the bird and the preening of the bird.
Cattle Egret Nest Building by Don Specht.
Yeah, what can I say? I mean, just everything on the bird is perfect, and even that back wing that has a little bit of the shadow there. The photographer did a really a nice job of bringing some of the detail out, and then of course you got it carrying the stick, and you know everything about the bird is sharp, and then you got that beautiful sky with you know just a little bit of the clouds to give that sky some texture onto it, and then you know flying with the tree in the background. So probably nothing that I would do to maybe improve this. Uh, you know, you could maybe give just a hair bit more room in the the lower left onto that, but that would really be about it. Yeah, even if that, I'd at least do it to see what if I like it any better or not. But just nicely done.
And by Jenny Gaynor.
Yeah, this is cool. I mean, this is really, really cool. And you know, I don't know if the photographer did this by a aperture selection or if they used one of these lens babies type of lenses that will do this type of stuff. But regardless, whatever the photographer used, I really love the vision that he or she had. I believe that's foxtail barley, and how that just you know itself is kind of thin. So she focused or he focused right onto that flower, and you say, "Oh, wait a minute, that flower is dead center." Well, it is dead center, but everything takes off from that flower, taking it to the outside. So just really nicely done. Very artistic, very creative. And my hat's off for the photographer taking a picture like this.
Okay, the pictorial category sevens. And we'll start with Blue Eyed.
Yeah, this is definitely Blue Eyed. Again, really nice, real nice. I like the really sharpness that you have of that top eye. and then the sharpness that you have of the nose and the fur going all around that onto it. And I think the way the softness you have beyond that top eye, that's okay, because you want me to concentrate on that eye and then down to the nose onto it. So I really like what you did. The biggest problem you have is on that lower left. I'm not sure what that is, but if I just had the softness of the cat fur, I'd be okay. But what I don't have, what I do have is I got some white intrusion there that I don't like, and I'm not sure what that is. You probably could have seen that when you looked at the viewfinder onto it, and I would have tried to remove it or shade it or whatever it would take and to have done that. Next.
Okay, what's that?
Yeah, I like how the boats are positioned. You know, I got the three boats there that you want me to kind of look at. And I like the vertical there simply because the moon that's up there in the top. And again, I definitely need that moon up there to make me understand is why do you show so much of that on the top onto it. But the problem that I have was I wasn't real sure if the moon was strong enough to carry all of that. It's a good story. It's a good storyteller. But I don't think the moon carries it over into a competition. But outside of that, everything you did there, as far as sharpness of the boats and the lake, etc., was really nice. I like the streaks of the light shooting up, and I actually like the silhouettes of the people that are onto the lower right, and I think that's kind of cool because that actually tells me a story on that part of the frame onto it. And then I also like the trees that are coming over there. But probably I don't think that the story itself made it really tough to put into a salon type competition. I don't think there's anything that I could tell that you've done. I think you chose the right shutter speed to do that onto it. You know, could you have used maybe a wider angle and showed some mushrooming up at the top? I'm not really sure onto it. I like the reflections. But for what you showed here, I think everything you did, I'm not sure how you could have improved that. I just don't think it was strong enough to work into competition. Next.
Sunrise.
Yeah, you got these. Of course, I'm trying to identify the ducks, and I said, I think those are northern shovelers. I have no idea what they are, but that's what I spent some time on. I like the pattern of the two ducks, the lower left. You can see which way they came. Well, then that top duck, I like the pattern that he took. You can see that he came in from here over to the right. And I think you did a good job of making this more of a panel. But I think what I would have done probably made it just a little bit more of a panel. I think I would have brought the lower up, maybe up about half the distance to the duck, or at least a third of the distance to the duck. And I also would have brought the black down just a little bit too. Then you do have more of a panel. I love the foggy feeling of it. I think you did really nice capturing the fog. Next. Yeah, kind of many times we see images of Hollow Rock, and it's usually a sunrise type of an image that you have onto it. And those of us that go up to the North Shore, we see a lot of images of Hollow Rock. And one of the problems that you have is we've seen so many images. A lot of times you compare, maybe to what you see, and you say, well, hey, that should be a sunrise shot. Well, not really. It doesn't have to be. I've gotten a couple of images I really like of Hollow Rock taken at 11 o'clock in the morning. And so I think what you did here, you did really a good job. You got really some great sky, and you got a gull flying through there, and the gull itself actually kind of looks sharp. And then you use probably a little bit faster shutter speed to get that image. And so you had a couple of choices here. Probably I would have chose a little bit slower shutter speed. That gull's going to be gone. And what that would do, that would have given me more of a smoothness of the water. So again, I'm not sure what the shutter speed on this. and I really don't know what the wave action would be, but I probably would have tried for maybe a 15-second shutter speed. And what that does, that gives that real smoothness that you have of the water. When you come to water, it's kind of like I said on waterfalls. I think you want the milky smooth, or I think you want to show, the water splashing. So, and I think that's the same thing I feel about lakes, a wavy lake. A lot of times I like the texture of wave. So I try to give a little faster shutter speeds. And then if the wave's action isn't very good, then I'll put on maybe a 6 or a 10 stop neutral density. And then I actually try to give it the smoothness of the lake. And those of you who know John Greger, I say that's a John Greger thing onto it. And here you can kind of caught it in between. I'll say that I appreciate you went there in the middle of the day. Yeah, I like what you did. I like, you can see the steering wheel there. You can see the shift lever onto it, and I can see the inside of the van onto it. Again, I like the old rusty look of the milk truck, and I like all of that. But at the same time, I want to see the whole milk truck. The aspens that's back there. It looks like it's in a great, great environment. And I hope you did take some pictures of the milk truck being in that type of an environment onto it. But that's kind of what I'm more or less seeing. The grass that you have there in the front is kind of a, well, should I or shouldn't I? You don't have to break it, but if you would have bent it out of the way, I think that also would have made a difference. I know it's all growing around the truck, but at the same time, I also want to see. I probably would have taken that and just bent that out of the way and put a stick or something over it to get it out of the way onto it. But exposure is dead on. Next.
Miss houses.
Yeah, I like the boathouse. I love that dock that's being there simply because that's where you're at. I like the dock that is being there, the boat dock onto it. I like the reflections that you have of the boathouses. Then you got the sky that's filling up that particular area. And for me, when it comes to reflections, I don't always like mirrored reflections. Actually, when I teach some of my classes, I tell people how to get away from mirrored reflections by throwing a handful of stones in just to give you something to look at. And I think this does that. The little bit of waves that you have there in the reflection puts more interest there than it would be if it was a mirrored reflection onto. So I really like the handling that you did of this. Very nice. Next.
Smoking purple shoes.
Yeah, again, this is one of these pictures you look at, and I see what the photographer did see. The black, the gray area. Then here are these really nice purple shoes. Now, I'm going to tell you probably what I would do. I don't think that would ever bring this up into a higher category, but just by your title, it was purple shoes. I really do believe you can use your slider tools and you can bring the purple out more. You can take your shadow and your paintbrush and you can open up the shadows, and then you can use your colored sliders. And I know there's a colored slider that would really bring the purple out. And that's your title. And so that's really what you want to really concentrate on is the purple shoes. With that, I like the image. I like I don't like smoking, but I like the idea of the cigarette. I think that's a cigarette anyway, in looks like maybe her hand on it. That also adds that interest to it. But at the same time, you got the black box or whatever that is right there in front that really is distracting on it also. And I'm not sure what you could have done with that. Except you had to move to the left, but then it may have ruined your image, what you're trying to show. Next.
fully albino.
Yeah, and this is a true albino. The pink eyes, the pink ears, the pink nose, you know, the white squirrel onto it. You really did capture the eye. The eye looks really nice and sharp, and the fur around the head looks really nice and sharp. And so there's probably nothing more that you yourself could have done as far as seeing the white squirrel and taking the picture. The problem is the squirrel just is where it shouldn't be. Is you got that really busy area there in that pine tree, and there's nothing you can do about that. And then you got the really bright background with all the branches coming there. So again, there's nothing you could have done with that. You had to take the picture, but again, it's one of those things you have to ask yourself is, you know, because sometimes we get involved emotionally with our pictures, but you got to say, you know, man, there's some pretty good photography. How will this compete? And this just makes it a tough competition image. Next.
St. Louis River in early summer.
Yeah, I like how you compose this. I like the flow of the water from the lower right, taking you all the way into the frame to the back there. You got some beautiful clouds. You know, you got the nice blue sky and you got the nice blue clouds. Oh, excuse me, the nice white clouds there onto it. There's nothing I could tell you how to compose this any differently. The aperture selection was perfect. It looks sharp all the way from the front all the way to the back. Probably the biggest thing is it just does not have that impact to it. So, but I think what you had before you was nicely handled. I like in this case we got a nice reflection. We got really a nice stars with a looked like you got a meteor or you know falling star, whatever you want to call it, coming through there onto it. I love the white. I like the reflection onto the white. And night photography is fun. Many of us do a lot of night photography now. And I always like to tell people for night photography, you got to have an interesting foreground. And you do, in this case of the mountain valley. And how those peaks come together as they slant down on both the mountain itself and the reflection itself is how they take your eyes to that little bit of the left center. Next.
On Lantana.
Yeah, beautiful job on the swallowtail. Is again, you can see the proboscis there, and you got really nice sharpness onto the antennas. We got that nice blue background. You're there probably on a kind of a sunny day, which does make shooting a monarch or excuse me, butterflies kind of really hard to do because of the contrast that you have. And probably again, what I would recommend is the abdomen of the butterfly. Yeah, I can see it. I can see some detail there. But again, I do think you could take your shadow slider. You could bring that out just a little bit, and then that would make the abdomen stand out. And then you got the brightness of the flowers. Not much you can do there because of the bright sunny day. Shooting butterflies on bright sunny days or insects in general is very difficult to do. I prefer, I call it light overcast days. Being retired, I can pick my days. So very nice.
Vila. Sorry.
Yeah, really nice job of handling the light. And again, the rim lighting that you have on these row of trees onto it. And I really like what you did. I do think you might be able to bring that top down a little bit, maybe halfway down. I don't want to hit the top of you, but half that distance, those top trees. At the same time, I think you did really a great job with that bench, putting that bench there down there onto the lower left. I mean, that really adds a lot of interest that you have to there. And you know, even in post processing, I would tell you to experiment with it just a little bit. I would probably try even your exposure slider and just a little bit, maybe a third stop. I think you can make that rim lighting on those bottom trees really shine a little bit more with just a hair more under exposure. Next. Yeah, I like the prairie feeling of this. We got the the bison out there grazing away onto it. So the picture is a prairie, and then you got the bison that are in the prairie to actually fill that prairie sequence out onto it. I think you did a good job with your composition. I do think you could probably warm this up just a little bit. I think if you even just use your white balance, you might be able to warm this up just a little bit. Mainly some of those yellowish, orangey type of grasses. I think you could warm that up just a little bit, which would actually make this pop just a little bit more onto it. I think you did a nice job on the sky. The sky's not interesting, and you did a good job of minimizing that. Next.
Okay, with the eights, we start out with Cascade Falls in Spring by Ken Wolter.
Yeah, just really really well done. And you heard me talk in a couple of the other images about milky smooth to watching the water splash. And in this case, the photographer chose a slower shutter speed to give it that milky smooth. And for me personally, that's generally what I want with my waterfalls. That's kind of where I go. Waves are different. I like the waves. I like to show the power of waves. But when it comes to waterfalls, I actually do like the milky smooth. And I think you did compose this really nice because the rocks on the left, I see a lot of interest. That green tree in the top there, that adds a lot of interest to it, onto it. Uh, and I think you showed the bottom part of this really nice also. Uh, Again, I don't know how this is to get to at all onto it, but I may have walked down and moved that stick a little bit, but that would just be me doing that. If you could do that, by the way. I mean, by the park rules and whatnot. Next.
My Feather, Sarah Niemanen.
Yeah, this is really cool. Really a nice choice of black and white. I think this is actually calls to be black and white onto it. I love the background that you have. I like the water spots onto the forward leaves here. I think the feathers there are nice and sharp. And then the head of the goose also is sharp. Uh, I probably may have given this a little bit higher, but I don't like the head being clipped on the top. If you got some room, you need to put some of that back in. Not much, but I don't like it being clipped right there itself onto it. Next.
Moody Lake by Mike Shrun.
Yeah, this is really cool. This is kind of one of these pictures that my eyes probably would have seen that sunrise or sunset. I probably would have seen that path. I'm not sure if I would have picked up that fence. I'm not sure if I would have. I may have. I don't know. But I think for the photographer to pick that up, to me, that just really makes it such a much more powerful image. It takes it away from just being a normal sunrise, sunset. And if you look at it, going through the fence, following the path, that literally is going to take you right to the rising sun or the setting sun onto it. So really nicely composed and very nicely handled in post processing for the exposure.
Reflecting on Sunset, Fred Sabatka.
Yeah, the same thing. One thing I always like to tell when I teach some classes, when I talk composition, and I actually tell people that I don't go through all this composition rules. I said experience will tell you, and you'll be surprised that it's second nature sometimes when you compose. And what I'm doing is I'm talking about lines. And look at the lines of this. If you look at the line of the shore on the left, look at the line of the shore on the right. You look at those grass reeds into the lake. All of them are pointing right towards the burst coming there into the center. And so again, I don't know if the photographer intended that, but a lot of times as you get the experience, you don't necessarily look for stuff. you just kind of move that camera around to get, okay, this composition is perfect. And then you get back on the computer and then you say, well, what? Look at how I mashed up those lines. That's just kind of second nature sometimes. So that's what I really like about this picture. Really nicely exposed. And I love the water. You got just a little bit of ripple in there to put interest. Like I say, I'm not real big on flat water. So I like the interest that is in there with a little bit of ripples on there. Then you got this marvelous sunburst coming up through the top of the clouds. So just nicely done.
Retired by Pat Chaconis.
Yeah, great. Now remember the milk truck that I talked about. This is kind of what I wanted to see on the milk truck. And I mean, here's really the story. And you know, this old retired tractor and just being surrounded by all this foliage. I mean, look at that, it's growing right through the engine. So we know that it's been there, and it's just a great storyteller here. You know, possibly you could have given it just a little bit more room on the top onto it if you have that room there. But just really nicely to see that, and I'm really glad that you showed the whole tractor. I'm not saying there's not a picture there for just a part of the tractor. There could be, but I think for competition, this is the picture for me.
Uncle Jed Clancy were at Kiwali Church last month.
I love that long title. So just nicely handled. You know, this really was a tough exposure to handle because you have the brightness there in the lower left, and then you also got the shadow area onto the right. And I think the photographer did a nice job either with the exposure to bring out the shadow or using the post processing to bring out the shadow. And I think you really filled the frame really nice. I like the palm tree that's there. I got like the tree there that's just in behind, and so just nicely done.
I forgot to name the maker, and that was Mick Richards. Now, Floating Boat Houses by Janice Bach.
Yeah, just really great color. I mean, just really a nice time of the day. You know, just you know, sunrise sunsets time frame, and you know, total interest that you have. You know, going all the way to the left, all the way down. Follow the boat houses. It takes your eyes diagonally. If I would say anything, I don't like the boathouse on the left that's cut in half. Uh, I don't know. Could you have done anything different? I'm not really sure because if you'd have moved the camera to the right to cut off that house, then I probably would have said, "Well, I want to see another house there in the upper right." So I'm not sure what you should have done onto it. But again, I don't like the door being cut in half like that onto it. But just very nicely handled. Next.
Sorry for the delay. Portrait Sand Sandwich by Kelly Perry.
I just love this picture. You know, being a grandpa, and I mean, my grandkids are older than this now, but I'm just saying I can just picture myself there with my grandkids, and notice the level that the photographer was at. The photographer wasn't standing up. He or she was almost eye level with these kids. And, you know, you look at this, you know, the little kid in the left there saying, what the heck is in here? And the little brother in the right saying, I don't care, just eat the darn thing. I mean, it's just really a great story here. And you could maybe have cropped that the upper left in just a little bit. And then that really would make you concentrate right there where the little guys there are having their lunch. So then the sandy feet, I mean, that just adds to the picture. So really nicely captured.
Mosaic tiles that are the size of your fingernail. Richards.
Yeah, this is just really nicely done. You know, I'm going to say I don't know if they used a fisheye lens or what the photographer used here, but whatever it was just an absolute perfect lens to use on this. I mean, I literally can feel I'm seeing almost the entire inside of the church here. And you know, everything is sharp. It's sharp from the front all the way to the top. And you know, there's nothing here that lacks any interest at all. Everything in this picture has interest, and you know, everything is taking you right to the you know, we'll say to the pews are taking you right there to the center of the sanctuary. So very nicely exposed. I don't know if this was an HDR or not, but it was certainly nicely done if it was. And very, very well done.
Okay,
Next.
that's all we have tonight.
Well,
I'd like
that's
to
it.
say thank you again to both John and Terry, our host. John, appreciate your helpful comments and insights on our image. Thank you for being so helpful with me with the salon.
Thank you, Jill.